Oh, and then he said some really biting things about Medjugorje.
This is your cake and eat it too type of document. And they're hoping to make everybody happy, but in the process, I don't think they're going to make anybody happy.
I always just thought of it as God is doing damage control at a place like that, because there's too many things at Medjugorje that really are concerning.
It's not that favorable, to be honest. And I think they're upset about that.
That's the thing. I don't think they believe in these apparitions at all. The guidelines that they issued 6-7 months ago say explicitly the criteria for approving an alleged apparition is whether the message it contains sows division in the church.
It's like speaking out of both sides of the mouth in this particular message.
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Yesterday, I put this out actually on my YouTube channel, what the Vatican did and didn't say, and why I still don't subscribe to Medjugorje. But yesterday, in fact, it was a big conference, kind of a big deal. It's being widely discussed, debated, and there's a lot of people angry about it, let's just say. What did the Vatican actually say and not say? Did you catch the World Over Live last night? Let me play this quick clip from you from Father Gerald Murray, friend of the show, on what he had to say to Raymond Arroyo. Have a listen.
Yes, the Holy See has embarked on what I consider to be a completely erroneous way of dealing with the question of apparitions. And this goes back to a document that Cardinal Fernandez issued, I guess, about 6 months ago, in which he said it's not the purview of the church to pronounce on the supernatural origin or not of any alleged apparition. Now, that was never heard of in the life of the church. That's precisely what the shepherds are supposed to do. So now they're saying we're going to prescind from saying whether Mary really is talking to these seers at Medjugorje. And we're simply going to say, since people go there and there are a lot of conversions and a lot of prayers, that there's good coming out of it. Now, wait a minute. If the seers are false seers, in other words, they either made it up or they're being deceived and under psychological maladjustment that's producing they're being convinced that the Virgin Mary is talking to them, we need to know that.
Sounds legit to me. We need to know that. We're just going to skip over that and move on? I don't know. Dr. Anthony Stein joins us from Return to Tradition YouTube channel. Good morning to you, Dr. Stein. What say you about yesterday's proclamation?
This sounds a lot like the ends justify the means to me. That if people are praying, if the people are praying more, then hey, the ends justify the means. And I just can't help but go back to previously condemned Marian apparitions and wonder if the Vatican is going to reopen the case on Bayside now. That's my favorite one to go to, because that was like a cult run by some weird lady out in the East Coast somewhere, and she had a whole bunch of people coming to her, and the local bishop was freaking out. And this was back in like the 70s, right, where a lot of the bishops were still reasonably orthodox. You could still give the benefit of the doubt to most bishops, and he condemned it completely. Now is the Vatican going to rule on Bayside? I mean, there's some weird stuff on Bayside.
The debate that I was last night, I was looking at various live streams and conversations going on surrounding the subject of Medjugorje, and you got folks that have been devotees to Medjugorje for a very long time. They're pretty upset about this too, because they realize that this proclamation, this document that the Vatican released, it's not that favorable, to be honest. And I think they're upset about that.
It's nothing new. They're not saying anything new in it. That's what I went over this morning on my live stream. I'm like, I started with back in 2017. Pope Francis said that there are spiritual fruits there that are good and that people are free to go and pray there. Don't talk to the seers. Oh, and then he said some really biting things about Medjugorje. Things that are nastier, phrased in a more strong way than I, as someone who does not believe in Medjugorje, would say it.
Wait, I'm going on pilgrimage with Bishop Strickland to Greece and to Turkey and more in May of 2025. I would love for you to join us on that trip. We're talking Thessaloniki, Athens, an Aegean cruise. We're going to Ephesus, the holy house where St. John the Apostle lived with the Blessed Virgin Mary. We're going to go to Patmos, where St. John received the vision of the apocalypse. And there's even an extension to Rome. I'm going to put a link in the description with all the details. Come hang out with us in Greece in 2025.
He did. In a classically Francis way. Like Pope Francis, he knows how to really hit someone with like a laser guided insult if he needs to.
he's mastered passive aggressiveness.
Right. And then when you look at the timeline of these things, 2019, they said something similar. 2021 was something similar was said. And now you get this big announcement that says literally nothing new. You're free to go have your bishops are free to promote a devotion if they want to. You're free to go on pilgrimage there. You're free to have devotion to this. We're not saying it's real. We're not saying it's supernatural. Don't talk to the seers.
Right.
That's also been the consistent message from that should raise a few eyebrows from people. But again, people don't think about this stuff. And the other thing that again, as someone who's not a big believer in Medjugorje, the messages at Medjugorje contain problems. I didn't mention this morning, but apparently one of the seers that recently said that the Virgin Mary thinks Pope Francis is one of the greatest popes of all time. There are conservative and traditionally minded Catholics who are big believers in Medjugorje, who are a part of what gets called recognize and resist. If that is the case for you, you need to reassess, because if he's one of the greatest popes of all time, you cannot resist him.
One thing I would say, and I said this yesterday when I put out my video yesterday to sort of give my own thoughts on this. One thing is I've always made a distinction. I've never understood when I've talked to people sincere Catholics. I'm not doubting their sincerity, their piety, their zealousness for the faith. But when I have these conversations, and they can't seem to separate, like, say, the experience of a pilgrim there versus the seers, the visions, and the messages. Like, I don't know why you can't separate those things. Someone could show up and feel the sense of peace. Someone could feel compelled to go to confession after having not been for decades. Someone might even say, I feel called to the religious life or the priesthood. These are all fantastic things, and I give God praise for every single one of those times. And maybe, dare I say, push even further, even there might be miracles, although I never really liked the whole rosary turning into gold thing. Very materialistic. But nonetheless, for whatever there is good there, praise be to God. I don't understand why there is this need to have them connected at the hip. They must be connected. It's both, and it's never either or. That always felt weird to me. What about you?
I always just thought of it as God is doing damage control at a place like that, because there's too many things at Medjugorje that really are concerning and red flags. One of them, it's a human trafficking hub. The area is. A lot of exorcists say it's a demonic activity hub, which is weird for a Marian apparition site. And virtually all the priests ever involved with Medjugorje have been excommunicated. Every one of them.
Yeah.
The bishop, local ordinary, has repeatedly condemned the apparition. So again, I don't understand this, but God is more than capable of doing damage control and using something like that for good ends. And so if I don't doubt the conversion experience people have, I just ask them to assess, learn the faith well enough. And if you start seeing conflicts with the messages you're being given and what the church is always taught, you have to side with the church. Otherwise, it's not Catholicism you've converted to. It's something else.
Let's go back to what Father Jerome Murray said last night on The World Over Live, because I thought it was an excellent point. It seems schizophrenic. The way I looked at this document, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes today, as well as a LifeSite News article. The way I look at it is this is them playing both sides. This is your cake and eat it too type of document. And they're hoping to make everybody happy, but in the process, I don't think they're going to make anybody happy on this. If in the same document that they're giving it the Nihil Obstat, highest level of approval, they're also saying, but there's big problems with some of the messages. There's big issues here, like the fact that there's no local ordinary who's ever approved this. In fact, they've never wanted the faithful to come to pilgrimage here. It took the Vatican to sort of allow for that to happen. They're acknowledging that in this document. That seems schizophrenic, doesn't it?
I mean, it's anti-collegiality, at least, isn't it? You're not respecting the supremacy of the local ordinary on all things, right? I mean, that's one of the things emphasized in the way the church is governed since the council is supposedly a recognition of the authority of the local bishop, that he has to really mess up for the Vatican to intervene, or so we're told. But on this, for whatever reason, and this predates Francis too by a long time, the Vatican has sort of just casually turned a blind eye to it. Again, I don't understand it, but there's an abdication.
Is the new policy that they issued back in, what was that, the springtime, 6 or 7 months ago, whatever it was, on how they judge these apparitions, are they just basically reducing apparitions to almost like just a piety, just plain old piety. Take the good, leave the bad. It's all okay. I mean, the danger seems to be when they do that they take the teeth out of some of these apparitions. And especially when you're thinking La Salette, you're thinking Fatima, I'm thinking Our Lady of Revelation and others. Some of those apparitions were grave warnings about bad times to come. And, it's a warning to get us to draw closer to God, to avoid the reality of that. If they take the teeth out of this and they just make them pious little feel-good moments that people can go and experience, what is that actually saying?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think they believe in these apparitions at all, because the guidelines that they issued 6-7 months ago say explicitly that one of the criteria for approving an alleged apparition is whether the message it contains sows division in the church, if it makes the laity distrust the hierarchy. Well, there goes all the ones you just mentioned. Our Lady of what gets called good success for some reason. Good event of the purification is a transliteration.
Right.
And Quito, Ecuador talks about a corruption in the priesthood. Priests being worldly. It talks about bishops who are not doing their job and being cowards and embracing error.
Stonecutters.
Same thing. Yeah, all that stuff. Akita says the same thing. And remember, Akita is not fully approved, because all the Vatican really did say about it was that this message lines up with the third secret. That's all they said, because most people don't understand this. Most of an approval of an apparition or a mystic is done by the local bishop. Right. Rarely does the Vatican actually finish the job of an approval. And it's like Fatima is the exception. Those kinds of cases are the exception, as are La Salette and a few others. Now the new rules say it will not be approved if it causes the laity to distrust the hierarchy. Well, what do you think is going to happen when you get a Marian apparition whose message is you have a corrupt hierarchy, people are leaving the faith because of it, and your priests are acting worldly and are engaged in sins of the flesh? I just summarized like 5 Marian apparitions there. What's going to happen when that goes before Cardinal Fernandez for approval? Disregarding. Yeah. I went on for a long time in my live stream about how this is the last group you want approving these things, because of just the news week that have been covered in the last week. You covered the news about the new 7 deadly sins and the sins against synodality, and you've covered in the past Cardinal Fernandez and all of his laundry list of problems. Are these the people who are that we want to be ruling on the orthodoxy of a Marian apparition?
Yeah, it's troubling. The LifeSite News article pointed out and if you go to the document itself, again, I'm going to link directly to the Vatican document, and there's a whole list of issues that they actually have with some of these messages. But the one that the Vatican or the LifeSite News article picked out, which I like, Michael Haynes, great journalist, by the way, he picks this one out to talk about. It says, a number of the messages from the gospel have been the source of much controversy. And he quotes, all religions are similar before God. God rules over them just like a sovereign over his kingdom. In the world, all religions are not the same because people have not complied with the commandments of God. They reject and disparage him. Boy, that is it's like speaking out of both sides of the mouth in this particular message and apparition. But all religions are similar before God. Have we heard of that recently, Dr. Stein? Sounds eerily similar to something we just had to deal with, isn't it?
Pope Francis recently said that a diversity of religions is a gift from God. It's a treasure from God. That means that it's an act of the will of God, that there are a diversity of religions. So I can see why they would give the highest level of quasi-approval to this apparition, because we're heading into the Synod on Synodality. Synodality means dialogue and listening to each other and not having judgment calls and changing whatever. I don't know what evangelization means under synodality, but this lines up perfectly with it. That's why they did this politics.
Dr. Anthony Stein, return to tradition. If you can jump back on at the top of the hour, we'll jump into the after show and conversate more about this. I'd love to have you back.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.